My name is Theresa Langford, but everyone calls me Tess. I'm 63, a retired internal financial auditor, and for the first time in decades, I live more with silence than with numbers. For most of my life, I believed order protected love. If everything balanced, no one would leave. That night, the night of our anniversary, I learned how wrong I was. Before we went out to dinner, I wanted to find the pen my husband kept in his desk drawer, the one we used every year to sign the card to each other. It was supposed to be a small ritual, a reminder that after 40 years, we still meant something steady. But rituals end quietly. They don't shout. They stop breathing. When I pulled the drawer open, it slid like a secret that wanted to be heard. Inside, beneath the neat stacks of papers, lay an envelope addressed in my husband's handwriting. It read, "For her." Not my name. Not even a hint of my initial. Just those two words. There was also a voucher from Harbor Sky Seaplanes and a blister pack of pills marked Zale-10. The voucher had tomorrow's date. The pills were half empty. My hand froze above them. I told myself there must be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a plan for me he had simply labeled wrong. But my name has always been Tess, not her. I placed everything back exactly as I'd found it. The drawer closed with a faint click, like a lock on something I couldn't unsee. From the hallway mirror, my face looked calm, maybe too calm, like a witness rehearsing silence. Downstairs, the house smelled of rosemary chicken. The table was set for two. A candle waited by the window, ready to burn for someone who would not arrive. He came down the stairs, smiling. "Ready, sweetheart?" His tie matched the silver pendant he'd given me in 1979, the one I thought he'd remembered. I nodded, reached for my purse, and said quietly, "Dinner's canceled." He blinked as if he hadn't heard. I repeated it, slower this time, every syllable sharp but even. "Dinner's canceled." Then I walked past him, out into the night air that tasted like salt and rain. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Silence can be louder than proof. If you've ever stood in a moment like that, when your world tilts but doesn't yet fall, stay with me. This isn't a story about anger. It's about clarity and how a woman learns to breathe through betrayal without breaking herself in half. I share it because so many of us keep quiet when something feels off. We tell ourselves we're overreacting, that trust is proof of love. But sometimes silence is survival. If stories like this speak to you, subscribe and stay close. One day, your calm might save you too. The sky over the harbor was darkening when I reached my car. I sat inside, gripping the steering wheel, counting the seconds between my breaths. For 20 minutes, I did nothing. Then the habits of my old job returned. The need to verify, to understand, to trace every small detail until the numbers told the truth. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our joint calendar. Nothing unusual. I opened our banking app. 2 recent charges stood out. Harbor Sky Seaplanes and a small pharmacy near his office, both on the same day. My pulse steadied. Patterns always do that for me. Even heartbreak looks cleaner when arranged in rows. A message pinged on my phone. "Running late. See you at Harbor Grill at 7. I stared at it, then at my reflection in the windshield. I could almost hear my old mentor's voice. "Don't confront without evidence. Document first." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. Even betrayal follows procedure. I started the engine, but instead of turning toward the restaurant, I drove to the marina. The night wind moved through the masts, a low metallic whisper. Harbor Sky's office lights were still on, Through the glass, I saw a wall of framed photographs, couples smiling beside silver seaplanes, champagne flutes in hand, the water behind them calm and endless. I imagined my husband's face there, the practiced charm, the tailored shirt. I wondered if her would stand where I should have been, looking at the same horizon I'd once believed belonged to us. On the drive home, I rehearsed nothing. Words felt unnecessary. The only thing that mattered was that envelope waiting upstairs and the way it had changed the air in our house. Every object seemed to know. The clock ticked softer. The candle never lit. The photo of us in Venice tilted slightly, as if it no longer wanted to stay straight. I went into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hand steady again. The taste of metal on my tongue reminded me of the old office files I used to handle. Proofs, receipts, signatures that could end careers. Betrayal, I thought, is just another kind of audit. You don't rage at it. You record it, step by step, until the balance sheet of truth evens out. I walked to the living room window. Across the street, Mabel Grant, my 74-year-old neighbor, was watering her roses. She looked up, caught my gaze, and nodded once. No words, just understanding. I wondered if she'd seen me leave earlier, wondered if she knew what kind of silence I was standing in. Upstairs, I didn't open the drawer again. I already knew too much. I sat on the edge of the bed, took off the silver pendant from 1979, and placed it beside the lamp. The light glinted off the engraving, 2 initials, T and G, barely visible now. 44 years of shared arithmetic, and I was finally ready to start subtracting. In the quiet, I remembered something my husband once said when we first met. You always notice the smallest things. He meant it as praise. I smiled then. Tonight, I still noticed. But not for him. For me. The morning after I canceled dinner, I woke to the sound of rain against the window. It was the kind of steady, quiet rain that makes the world look honest. My coffee mug left a faint ring on the kitchen table, right beside the newspaper headline about rising insurance fraud. I traced the circle with my finger and thought about the envelope. For her. 2 words. And yet, they'd redrawn the borders of my entire life. Old instincts came alive, the kind I thought I'd retired with my office badge. I used to audit numbers. Now I would audit truth. Not with confrontation or tears, but with observation. I started by opening my laptop. Graham's calendar was synced to our shared account, something he'd once insisted on for transparency. The irony didn't hurt yet. It just made me efficient. One entry caught my eye. Anniversary flight, Harbor Sky Seaplanes. Booked under my name, paid by his corporate card. Attached was a digital confirmation and an insurance note labeled AD&D 2.2 MBuzz. Accidental death and dismemberment. The policyholder, Graham Langford. Beneficiary, Theresa Langford. Except the signature wasn't mine. I leaned closer. The e-signature was curved differently, an imitation of my initials but off by 1 pixel width. Whoever forged it didn't know I still notice fonts like people notice faces. I sat back, feeling the slow pulse in my neck. For years, I'd helped clients trace financial discrepancies, patterns, trails, hidden transfers. I used to believe those skills belonged to a past life, but betrayal brings old tools out of storage. I took a screenshot, then another. Each file I named the same way I used to label audit evidence. Exhibit 1A, Exhibit 1B. It was comforting, in a strange, surgical way. Still, I needed a second set of eyes. I called Paula Reed, my oldest friend. She ran a small travel agency near the harbor, the same one that handled bookings for half the local hotels. When she answered, her voice was bright, familiar, too alive for what I was about to ask. "Tess, happy anniversary, honey. Are you flying somewhere special?" I let the silence stretch. "Can you check something for me?" I gave her the confirmation code from the email. I heard her typing, the clack of keys like a slow metronome counting down to truth. "Okay. Reservation under Tess Langford. 2 passengers. Departure tomorrow at 8 a.m. Harbor Sky Pier C." "2 passengers?" I asked quietly. "Yeah, says so right here. Notes say anniversary flight." I closed my eyes. The sound of rain grew louder, or maybe my heartbeat did. "Paula, can you see who booked it?" She hesitated. "It's marked private, but I can trace the payment. Hold on." Another pause. "Paid by Langford Financial Group corporate account. Contact G. Langford." "Can you send me a copy?" She lowered her voice. "Tess, is everything okay?" I wanted to say yes. Instead, I said, "Just send it, please." When the email arrived, I opened the attachment and saw my name printed on a form titled Passenger A. Beneath it, Passenger B, Guest. No name. Just that word, guest. For a woman who lived her life in clarity, that single blank space was unbearable. The phone rang again. Paula's tone had changed. "Tess, there's something else. There's an insurance policy attached to the booking. Looks like a travel add-on, but the amount is unusually high." "2.2 million? How did you know?" "I read faster than you think." She exhaled softly. "Tess, that's not normal. I've never seen one that high." "I know," I said. "Send me everything you can find." After I hung up, I leaned back in my chair and watched the cursor blink on the screen. That small pulse of light reminded me of hospital monitors, of quiet beeps before someone decides what to do next. Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It types in lowercase, leaves attachments, hides behind automatic signatures. I opened our joint insurance folder and searched for the policy number. It wasn't there. He'd kept it separate, unlinked. But I knew where else to look. I pulled out an old flash drive labeled Taxes 2019-2021. Inside, among spreadsheets and PDF returns, was a folder named Conservatorship Drafts. My breath hitched. Conservatorship. The legal process that lets one spouse control the other's financial life in case of mental incapacity. Drafts, plural, each dated within the last 6 months. I opened the most recent file. The form listed Graham as the proposed conservator and me as the protected party. The justification field read, "Early cognitive decline, memory lapses affecting judgment." My eyes blurred for a second, not from tears but disbelief. I'd spent 35 years managing million-dollar audits without a single error, and yet, on paper, I was suddenly forgetful, dependent, vulnerable. The rain softened outside. I stared at my reflection in the dark computer screen. I didn't look fragile. I looked like someone who'd been miscalculated. That's when a memory surfaced, the first lesson my father taught me about numbers. "When something doesn't add up," he'd said, "don't change the numbers. Change the light you look at them under." I stood up and switched off the lamp. The room fell into a gray half-shadow. In that muted light, the documents on my screen seemed clearer, sharper. Every line item was a thread, and I was ready to follow each one to its end. The phone buzzed again. A message from Graham. "Morning, love. I'll be home late. Big client dinner." I typed back only 3 words. "Take your time." Then I deleted the conversation and backed up every file to a separate drive. Evidence first, emotions later. At noon, Paula texted one last update. Got your docs. Be careful, Tess. Some things can't be unseen. I smiled faintly. She was right. Once you start an audit, you can't pretend the discrepancies don't exist. I stood by the window, the rain slowing to mist. The envelope still sat in the drawer upstairs, untouched, pretending to be ordinary. I realized then that knowing too much doesn't hurt as much as pretending not to. That evening, I brewed tea, logged off my computer, and opened my notebook. On the first page, I wrote 3 words: verify before trust. The second line, dinner was canceled. The audit begins. I didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, too neat, as if the walls themselves were waiting for me to confirm what they already knew. The sound of the refrigerator hum filled the kitchen, the kind of mechanical rhythm that used to comfort me when Graham worked late, and I believed that silence meant peace. Around 3 in the morning, I went into his study again. The drawer stayed closed. I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened the bottom cabinet where we stored our old devices, the ones that carried pieces of our lives in forgotten files. Inside was a silver digital recorder wrapped in an elastic band. I remembered it immediately. Our son had given it to us 15 years ago, back when Graham still practiced his speeches aloud before meetings. He used to record everything, even our anniversary messages. One of those recordings, I recalled, had my voice laughing, teasing him for being too formal even at home. I charged the device, pressed play, and waited. A faint click. Then his voice filled the room. Tess, if you're hearing this, I'm probably still the luckiest man alive. His younger voice sounded lighter, confident, untouched by the kind of secrecy that later hollowed him out. You have this way of noticing everything. Details, numbers, things no one else does. Sometimes it scares me how precise you are. But it also saves me. You keep me honest. I closed my eyes. The sound carried warmth I hadn't felt in years. He had once admired what he would later fear. The recording continued, laughter blending with the clinking of glasses. To 40 years from now, he said, and to never letting the math of life get in the way of love. My own voice responded, softer, younger, full of belief. Then don't make me audit your heart. The line cut through the air, sharp and familiar. I replayed it twice. Back then, it had been a joke. Now it felt like a warning we'd both ignored. I set the recorder down and leaned against the desk. The past has a way of mocking the present when it arrives uninvited. The voice memo wasn't proof of anything, no deceit, no numbers to trace, but it carried something worse: context. The man who once relied on my honesty had built a world where it was his greatest threat. I sat there for a long while, the faint hum of the charger filling the room. I thought of how many couples measure love in anniversaries, how many believe loyalty is automatic, like a recurring payment that never needs to be checked. I had believed that too. Now, I knew better. Love isn't an investment. It's an audit that never ends. When morning light crept through the blinds, I poured coffee and listened again. The voice memo ended with a soft exhale, followed by my own laughter. I caught the sound of a drawer closing in the background of that old recording. The same click as the one last night. The same drawer. The symmetry made my skin tighten. Life repeats itself, I thought, until someone pays attention. At 8, Paula called. Tess, I couldn't stop thinking about you, she said. You're not going to believe this, but Harbor Sky has another booking under the same card for next month. Same time, same flight path. 2 passengers? I asked. 2, she confirmed. And this one lists the second passenger's name, Monica Voss. The name meant nothing yet, just another column in a spreadsheet waiting for context. Can you send me that too? Of course. And Tess, you sure you're okay? I'm fine, I lied. After the call, I walked to the window. Graham's car wasn't in the driveway. He had left early, maybe to cover new tracks, maybe because lies wake earlier than truth. The rain from last night had washed the garden clean. Even the pathstones looked brighter, like they'd been waiting for light to return. I sat at the table and wrote in my notebook again. Truth hides in repetition. It was something I used to tell my interns. If an error appears twice, it's not random, it's design. I underlined it twice. The phone buzzed. A message from Graham. Miss you already. Tonight, same table? I stared at the words until they lost meaning. He didn't know I had listened to the younger version of him only hours ago, the one who swore he'd never let the math get in the way. Maybe he'd forgotten, or maybe he thought I had. I decided to record something of my own. I turned on the same device, pressed record, and spoke quietly. This is Tess Langford. Today is our anniversary. I found a policy I didn't sign, and a name that isn't mine. If anything happens to me, this is my note of balance. My voice trembled only once. I stopped the recording and hid the device inside my own drawer. It wasn't fear that guided me, but precision. Fear makes people sloppy. Precision saves them. By evening, I dressed for dinner as if nothing had changed. When Graham walked through the door, he smiled too widely, kissed my cheek, and said, "You look lovely." I thanked him, met his eyes, and thought of that old recording again. You have this way of noticing everything. He poured wine into 2 glasses. I lifted mine, watched the surface ripple slightly under the light, and placed it back down untouched. To 40 years, he said. I smiled. And to the math of love, I replied. He didn't flinch, but his eyes flickered, just for a moment, as if the words had reminded him of something he'd forgotten to hide. I held that silence between us like evidence. When he looked away to adjust his cufflink, I noticed the reflection of the silver, pendant in the window. It caught the glow of the dining room light and trembled faintly, as if remembering a time when everything was simpler. I wondered whether that was what forgiveness looked like before it broke. After he left the table to take a call, I slipped into the study again. I placed the recorder back in the drawer beside the envelope, aligning it perfectly with the edge. Then I whispered to the empty room, "Let's see what you sound like now." The house answered with silence, the truest confession of all. By the next evening, the rhythm of our marriage had returned on the surface, the way a lake looks calm while the undertow rearranges the silt beneath. I woke early, dressed neatly, and spent the morning pretending to prepare for another day of routine. Routine was a costume I wore well. It allowed me to breathe inside the lie while studying its edges. That night, Graham suggested dinner again. "Let's try this one more time," he said, his voice measured, almost gentle. No tension, no surprises. I agreed. Calm is the best disguise. When we arrived at the small French restaurant downtown, the hostess smiled like she'd seen us every year. Maybe she had. She led us to the same table we'd claimed for 2 decades. Corner booth, soft lighting, ocean print above us. The familiarity almost made me ache. He handed me the menu as if this were a test we'd both rehearsed. "You still like the sea bass?" he asked. "I do," I said, keeping my tone even. He smiled. "Good. Let's not complicate things tonight. I smiled back. I prefer things simple. The waiter poured 2 glasses of wine. Graham lifted his quickly, as though the first sip might reset the night. I held mine but didn't drink. The memory of the Zale-10 pills flickered through my mind. My gaze moved from the wine to his hands, steady, confident, too practiced. He reached for the bread basket. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I've been listening," I replied. "To what?" "The small things," I said, tearing a piece of bread. "They tell the larger truth." He laughed softly, uneasy. "That sounds like something you'd say at work." "Old habits," I murmured. He buttered his bread slowly. "We don't need to bring work into tonight." "Then let's not," I said, setting down my napkin. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Around us, other couples clinked glasses, their laughter faint and unburdened. I watched the reflection of the candle flame tremble against his wine glass. It reminded me of that old voice memo, his younger self promising not to let math get in the way of love. I wondered what he would say if he knew that his promise had turned into evidence. The waiter returned with 2 plates. I waited for Graham to take the first bite. And when he did, I noticed the faint hesitation. A pause so brief it could have been nothing. Yet it wasn't. His eyes flicked toward my untouched glass. I could almost hear the calculation moving behind them. "You're not drinking?" he asked lightly. "Not tonight." He smiled too quickly. "Trying to outlive me?" I met his gaze. "Just trying to stay clear." He laughed again, a little louder than necessary, and took another sip. The mask was flawless except for the smallest tremor in his hand when he set the glass down. Years of reading body language in audits taught me that truth leaks through the smallest details. That tremor was enough. "Graham," I said quietly, "do you remember the first time we came here?" He looked surprised by the question. "Of course. You ordered the salmon and sent it back twice." "I did," I said. "You told me perfection was exhausting." He smiled. "And you told me honesty was worse." "I was wrong," I said. He tilted his head, uncertain whether to take it as nostalgia or warning. "You've been distant lately. Is something wrong?" I folded my hands on the table. "Just thinking about the future." He nodded. "That's good. Planning ahead. You always were the planner." His words landed heavier than he intended. Planning ahead. Conservatorship drafts. Insurance forms. All the quiet preparations I'd uncovered in the past 48 hours lined up like a perfectly reconciled ledger. I forced a faint smile. "Yes, planning makes me feel safe." He lifted his glass again, but his hand trembled more noticeably this time. The moment he noticed me watching, he steadied it against the table. "Are you cold?" I asked softly. "Fine," he said, his voice tightening. I leaned back, studying him the way I used to study inconsistent numbers, without emotion, only precision. He didn't know that every small reaction was data, every hesitation a confirmation. When dessert came, he reached for my hand across the table. "Let's not lose us, Tess," he said. "We've been through worse." "Have we?" I asked. He paused, unsure. "Marriage has its seasons. I prefer accounting terms," I said quietly. "They're less sentimental." He chuckled, but it died in his throat when I added, "When something doesn't balance, it's not seasonal, it's structural." He withdrew his hand. The waiter arrived with the check, and the silence between us thickened. As we walked out, the cool night air pressed against my skin like truth made visible. He offered his arm. I didn't take it. I could feel his confusion rising behind me like static. On the drive home, He turned on the radio, filling the car with the illusion of normalcy. I watched the reflection of passing lights glide across the windshield, fragments of brightness that vanished too quickly. When we reached the house, I thanked him for dinner. He looked relieved, maybe thinking the storm had passed. "It was nice," he said. "It was necessary," I replied. He didn't ask what I meant. Some questions are safer, unspoken. Inside, he went upstairs while I stayed by the window, listening to the sound of the car keys dropping into the glass bowl near the door. The faint metallic clink echoed through the hallway like punctuation at the end of a chapter. In my notebook, I wrote, "Test 1 complete. Instinct confirmed." Then I closed it, slid it beneath the ledger, and turned off the light. In the dark, the house seemed to exhale. I felt no victory, only preparation. The quiet kind, the kind that comes before numbers finally add up. The following morning arrived with a softness that didn't belong to what was unfolding. The light coming through the curtains looked the same as it always had, pale and calm, as if unaware of the quiet dismantling happening beneath it. I made coffee, cracked the window, and listened to the faint sound of gulls over the harbor. For a moment, I almost believed the lie of peace. Graham came downstairs later than usual, smelling of expensive cologne and resolve. He greeted me with that same rehearsed warmth, the kind people wear when they've practiced sincerity in front of a mirror. "Morning, sweetheart," he said. "You're up early." "Old habits," I replied. He nodded, poured himself coffee, and asked what my plans were for the day. I told him I might visit the university to see Evan. That wasn't a lie. Our son had texted me the night before. Something simple. An invitation for lunch. A small attempt at connection. I told Graham I needed a walk, then watched him leave for work. The front door closed softly behind him, but the echo stayed. By noon, I met Evan near the campus cafe. He looked like every bit of the man I'd hoped he'd become. Kind eyes, careful posture, still believing in the best parts of people. He hugged me and said, "You look tired, Mom." "Just didn't sleep well," I said. We ordered sandwiches and sat outside beneath the shade of an oak tree. He talked about his students, about marketing trends, about how authenticity was the new strategy. I listened quietly, amused by the irony. Then he leaned forward. "Dad said you canceled dinner. Everything okay between you two?" I took a slow breath. "We just needed space." He smiled gently. "You've always said marriage is about communication." "It is," I said. "And silence is part of communication too." He looked puzzled, maybe a little hurt. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Evan, do you have the photos from your last fishing trip with your father? The one you posted online?" He frowned, surprised by the question. "Yeah? Why?" "I'd like to see them." He unlocked his phone, scrolling through images until he found them. His father smiling by the dock, sunglasses glinting, one arm raised toward a silver seaplane in the background. The caption read, "Perfect day before the storm rolled in." "Can you zoom in on the metadata?" I asked casually. He laughed. "Mom, you're the only person I know who still checks metadata." But he did it anyway. When the date appeared, his smile faded. "That's strange," he said. "It says this was taken 2 weeks before we went." I nodded slowly. "Interesting, isn't it?" He studied the photo again, brow furrowed. "Why would Dad post it later?" "Maybe he liked how it looked," I said softly. "Maybe it was meant for someone else." He looked up, confusion replacing warmth. "Mom, what are you saying?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Just noticing." He sighed, leaning back. You two always had your little riddles. I smiled faintly. It's how we stayed sharp. He laughed once, awkwardly. Dad's not great at secrets, you know. He's too proud for that. I know, I said. That's why they're easy to find. He glanced at me then, realizing something heavier sat behind my calm tone. Mom, is this about work? About something financial? It's about balance, I said. The kind you can't put in a spreadsheet. He hesitated, uncertain whether to press further. You sound like your old self, he said finally. Maybe I'm remembering who that was, I replied. When we finished lunch, he stood and hugged me again, longer this time. I don't know what's going on, but I trust you. Good, I said softly. Just keep that trust somewhere safe. Don't lend it too easily. He smiled. You're talking about Dad, aren't you? I didn't answer. Silence is an answer when it's intentional. On the drive home, I thought about how children see their parents as fixed points, like landmarks that never move. Evan still saw his father through the lens of old stories, the man who taught him to ride a bike, who cheered at graduation, who talked about legacy and family values. He didn't see the debt notices, the policy, the signature that wasn't mine. I didn't blame him. Belief is its own form of inheritance. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked undisturbed, every curtain in place, every light aligned. But I knew better now. Stability can be staged. I went upstairs to the study, opened my notebook, and wrote, Metadata confirms deception. Loyalty test 2. Result noted. Then I drew a single line under it, as I used to when closing a section in an audit file. Clear, clean, final. That evening, Graham came home with a smile too large for his face. You'll never guess who I ran into today, he said. Evan, he told me you had lunch. I'm glad. I'm glad too, I said. He poured himself a drink, loosened his tie, and sat beside me on the sofa. He's a good kid. He worries about us. He gets that from me, I said lightly. He chuckled. You always were the worrier. I prefer the term realist, I replied. He lifted his glass, studying me over the rim. You seem different lately. Do I? Yes, like you're calmer. I've been thinking, I said, about what really matters. He nodded, sipping his drink. And what's that? Truth, I said simply. He smiled, but his eyes flickered again, the same nervous tremor I'd seen at dinner. He looked down at the pendant around my neck, the one engraved with our initials, and reached out to touch it. Still wearing this, huh? For now, I said. He chuckled softly. You're hard to read these days, Tess. That's good, I said. I finally learned from the best. He looked at me for a long moment, something uncertain shifting behind his gaze. Then he leaned back and turned on the television, the sound too loud for the size of the room. I watched the light from the screen flicker across his face, erasing and redrawing the man I used to know. When he fell asleep in the chair, I turned the volume down and whispered to myself, one more piece confirmed. The reflection in the window showed both of us, the deceiver and the observer, separated by the thin glass of silence. I turned off the lamp, left him there, and went upstairs to prepare for what would come next. The following day, I drove toward the harbor under a sky washed pale by morning light. The water shimmered like glass, too smooth to trust. I told Graham I was meeting Paula for lunch, which wasn't entirely untrue. I did plan to see her, but not before confirming something first. The envelope, the booking, the policy, all of it pointed toward Harbor Sky. I needed to see the place with my own eyes, to feel what kind of air surrounded the people who signed those papers. The docks were alive with movement. Gulls diving, ropes creaking, engines humming. Harbor Sky's office stood near the far end. Its logo of a silver seaplane curved into a perfect arc over the blue door. Inside, I expected order, the sound of printers, the murmur of polite conversation. Instead, I heard laughter, warm, unguarded laughter. I followed the sound and stopped short when I saw her. A woman, maybe mid-40s, stood near the counter, phone in hand, smiling at something on the screen. Her hair was dark blonde, loosely tied. Her blouse expensive but unbuttoned one too many times for business. Next to her stood a teenage girl, maybe 16, impatient and restless, tapping her foot as she sipped a soda. The woman thanked the receptionist, took 2 glossy brochures, and turned toward the exit. I recognized the initials on her leather tote before I even saw her face. MV Consulting LLC, the same name from the wire transfer. Monica Voss. She noticed me standing near the brochures and smiled politely. Sorry, long wait. You'd think Paradise came with faster paperwork. I returned the smile. Paradise usually costs more than it says on the brochure. She laughed, caught off guard by the tone. Isn't that the truth? Her daughter rolled her eyes. Mom, can we go? You said we'd be quick. Almost done, Ruby, Monica said. The girl turned toward me, polite but curious. You flying today too? Not today, I said. Just looking. Monica tucked the brochures into her bag, the initials MV catching the light. Well, enjoy. I hear the view is unforgettable. I'm sure it is, I replied. As they walked out, I watched them through the glass door. The mother checked her phone, the daughter glanced up at the planes, and for a brief second their reflections merged in the window. 2 people caught in the same fragile frame of survival. Something in that moment softened me. Whatever Monica was to Graham, she was also a woman trying to keep her balance in a story that might crush her too. I turned back to the receptionist. I'm supposed to confirm a reservation under Langford, I said, keeping my voice even. She typed quickly. Yes, Mrs. Langford. We have you for tomorrow morning. 2 passengers. Can I see the details? I'm sorry. Our policy doesn't allow sharing manifests without both signatures. I smiled faintly. Of course. I thanked her and stepped outside. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel. I walked past a row of benches until I found one with a view of the runway. A white seaplane waited there, its wings glinting. A man in uniform loaded 2 champagne flutes and a small bouquet onto a tray near the cabin. The scene was almost beautiful, almost. Beauty, I realized, was just a disguise for precision. Everything lined up too perfectly. 2 glasses, 2 names, 1 lie. A few minutes later, Paula texted me. At Cafe Mariner. You close? On my way, I replied. At the cafe, she waved from a corner table, a folder already waiting beside her latte. You're going to want to see this, she said, before I even sat down. Inside the folder were printed statements from the corporate account. The wire to MV Consulting, $60,000, cleared 2 weeks ago. The memo field read, Retainer. Paula frowned. Consulting retainer? For what? And why to a personal LLC? I shook my head. Not consulting, I said quietly. Complicity. She hesitated. Tess, you're scaring me. I'm just counting, I said. Every lie adds up eventually. She studied my face. You're planning something, aren't you? Planning is how I breathe, I said simply. We finished lunch, but I barely tasted anything. My mind kept returning to Monica's voice, that easy laughter, the daughter calling her mom, the way Monica said, paradise. Maybe she didn't even know she was part of something darker. Maybe she thought she was saving herself. That evening, when Graham came home, I asked how his day was. He smiled, poured wine, and said, "Busy. The markets are restless." "Everything volatile these days," I replied. He nodded. "You should take a trip. Get some air." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe soon." As he went, upstairs I looked through the glass doors toward the harbor. A faint reflection of the setting sun turned the water gold. Somewhere down there, a woman named Monica was preparing for a flight that wasn't hers to enjoy, and a girl named Ruby was watching, learning too early what happens when truth hides behind luxury. In the kitchen, I opened my notebook and wrote, "The harbor is never neutral. It mirrors whoever stands before it." Then I closed the cover gently, as if not to wake the truth already stirring beneath it. By morning, the air had that strange stillness that comes before storms, the kind that makes ordinary things feel temporary. Graham left early again, leaving behind the faint scent of cologne and the sound of his car fading down the hill. I waited 5 minutes before calling Eddie Sloan. Eddie was a forensic accountant I'd known for decades. Dry humor, sharp mind, no patience for drama. When we worked together, he'd always said, "Money is the purest language. It doesn't lie. People do." I trusted him for that reason alone. When he picked up, his voice was the same steady baritone it had always been. "Tess Langford. Either you're bored or someone's cooking the books." "Second one," I said. I figured. "Send what you've got." I forwarded the folder Paula had given me. The wire transfer, the policy, the receipts. Within 10 minutes, he called back. "This isn't random," he said. 60,000 to MV Consulting, same day as the insurance purchase. That's coordination, not coincidence. "I need proof of intent," I said. "Not just suspicion." He grunted. "You always did." I smiled faintly. "And you always delivered." "Give me a few hours," he said. "I'll trace the routing details." "You still have access to your home network?" "Yes." "Then I might need your router log. You're still using the same IP range from when we did the Corbin case, right?" "I am," I said. Impressed, he remembered. "Good. If both accounts logged in from the same machine, we'll have our match." After hanging up, I paced the kitchen, the sound of my steps echoing like a metronome. Numbers have rhythm, and so does deceit. Every lie lands on a beat. You just have to find the pattern. By noon, Eddie sent me a screenshot. "Got it," his message read. Attached were 2 entries, one from Graham's office, one from the MV Consulting account, both originating from the same IP address. The timestamp difference was 27 seconds. I stared at the screen until the lines blurred. In 27 seconds, a life can change direction. A signature can be forged, a fortune transferred, a trust broken. Eddie called again. "I'm sending you a clean report. But Tess, listen. This isn't just about embezzlement. It's about cover. He's laundering his mistake through that woman's LLC." "I know," I said softly. "You going to confront him?" "Not yet." He exhaled. "You're building a case." "I'm building clarity," I corrected. "Same thing when you do it right," he said. That afternoon, I met Paula again at her office. She had printed copies of the wire confirmation and a note scribbled in the corner. "IP matched, verified." She looked at me as if seeing someone new. "You're scaring me again, Tess." "Don't be scared," I said. "Be precise." she sighed. You sound like you're back at work. I am, I said. This time, the audit's personal. She hesitated. What are you going to do with this? Wait, I said, and watch. As I drove home, the harbor shimmered under the afternoon sun, waves folding into themselves like secrets. I parked by the bluff and sat there, listening to the water hit the rocks. The world had a rhythm again, predictable, steady. I needed that. That evening, Graham walked in carrying a bottle of champagne. Good news day, he said. Oh? He smiled. Closed a deal. Feels like the tide's turning. I'm sure it is, I said. He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine. To us, he said. To balance, I replied. He laughed. Still my auditor, huh? Always, I said. We toasted, and he drank deeply. I only raised the glass to my lips, letting the bubbles kiss the air before setting it down. He didn't notice. After dinner, while he took a call in the den, I opened my notebook and wrote, Wire confirmed. Machine match. Retainer ill complicity. Pattern consistent. I closed it and looked toward the door. The faint hum of his voice drifted down the hallway, smooth and confident, the same tone he used when negotiating deals or disguising debt. I walked quietly to the study and opened his desk drawer again. The envelope was still there, perfectly placed. I didn't touch it this time. I just watched the edges, how neatly it fit into the space, like a puzzle piece waiting for the final picture. When I turned to leave, something on the shelf caught my eye. A small brass key, tied with a ribbon. It didn't belong to any of our locks. I slipped it into my pocket. Downstairs, Graham ended his call and smiled. You're quiet again, he said. Just thinking, I replied. About what? About how easily people trust patterns that favor them. He chuckled. That sounds like you. Maybe it is, I said, holding his gaze. Later that night, as he slept, I sat by the window with the key in my hand. It was small, unremarkable, but it belonged somewhere. Maybe a box. Maybe a locker. Maybe the last secret he hadn't filed under my name. I turned off the light, whispering into the darkness. Every number finds its sum. In the silence, the sound of the harbor rose faintly, waves striking the shore in patient rhythm. I realized I no longer felt afraid. I only felt ready. 2 days later, I decided to follow the key. It had sat on my nightstand like a question too quiet to ignore. Graham left the house at 7 sharp, briefcase in hand, his usual farewell kiss grazing the air rather than me. I watched from the window until his car disappeared, then retrieved the key and the folder of evidence I'd collected. The brass was worn smooth, the ribbon faintly scented with his cologne. I turned it between my fingers, remembering the way he used to label everything in his office drawers. Neat, systematic, proud of his order. Men like Graham hid chaos inside symmetry. The tag attached to the ribbon read HHW. It took me only a moment to remember Harbor Wellness, the upscale rehabilitation and health center near the marina. Graham had mentioned it once, in passing, when talking about legacy planning. I hadn't asked questions then. I should have. I drove there late in the morning. The parking lot shimmered under the sun, full of polished cars and quiet money. Inside, the lobby smelled of salt and eucalyptus, the kind of air designed to convince people they were safe. Behind the reception desk stood a young woman with a soft smile and a practiced calm. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome back, Mr. Langford." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. My face didn't move. I simply returned her smile. Actually, I'm Mrs. Langford. Her expression flickered, a quick flash of confusion. Oh, of course. I'm so sorry. Well, your husband was here last week. For paperwork, I believe. What kind of paperwork? I asked gently. She hesitated, scanning her screen. It looks like, well, I'm not sure I can disclose the details. Something with Northlight Holdings, I think. He said it was a routine update for your wellness plan. Northlight Holdings. The same name that had appeared on the conservatorship drafts. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said. He always handles the updates. The receptionist smiled again, relieved by my calm. Would you like to leave a message for him? No, thank you, I said. I just wanted to make sure everything was in order. She handed me a small envelope. He left this for the file, but I can't keep personal items in storage. Perhaps you should take it. I accepted it, thanked her, and walked out into the sunlight. The envelope was unsealed. Inside, folded neatly, was a document titled Conservatorship Petition. Langford Case. The date was stamped 3 days ago. My name was printed under Protected Party. I stood by the edge of the parking lot, the paper trembling slightly in the breeze. Everything he'd been building, every lie, every wire, every signature, was now lined up to make me disappear quietly and legally. When I got back to my car, I called Eddie. It's worse than we thought, I said. He's already filed. He whistled softly. Filed? Under what grounds? Impaired judgment, I said. Early cognitive decline. Eddie swore under his breath. Tess, you need to get counsel. This isn't a financial scam anymore. It's personal erasure. I know, I said. That's why I'm documenting every step. He was silent for a moment. You're calm, he said finally. Calm is control, I answered. Before heading home, I stopped at a nearby cafe overlooking the water. I spread the papers out on the table and studied the signature line. Graham's was there, clean and steady. The notary stamp read, pending verification. He'd prepared everything. Insurance, conservatorship, even the narrative that would make me look incapable. But he'd made one mistake. He underestimated memory. People like Graham forget that details are loyal. They stay. I opened my notebook and wrote, Harbor Wellness. Signature confirmed. Conservatorship pre-filed. Northlight EO control arm. I tore a small square from the page and wrote beneath it, The key unlocks more than doors. When I drove home, the street felt narrower than usual, as if the houses leaned in to listen. Inside, the air was thick with cologne and faint music playing from his study. He was home early. Surprise, he said when I walked in. Client canceled. Thought I'd beat the traffic. How thoughtful, I said. He smiled, walking toward me. Where have you been? Running errands, I replied. You? Paperwork, he said easily. Just the usual forms. Always so diligent, I murmured. He chuckled. You used to like that about me. I still do, I said. Diligence is revealing. He looked amused, unaware that his words from the morning receptionist still echoed in my mind. Welcome back, Mr. Langford. That night, after he went to bed, I sat at his desk. I placed the brass key on the drawer beside the envelope labeled For Her. They looked like siblings, two objects designed to unlock the same lie. I took a slow breath and whispered to the empty room. You're filing me away, but I'm archiving you. Then I closed the drawer and turned off the light, leaving only the faint reflection of my face in the glass. For the first time, I saw not the betrayed wife, but the auditor returning to finish her report. The next morning began with a strange stillness, the kind that warns you something is already gone. I walked into the bedroom, sunlight pooling across the dresser, and noticed the empty space immediately. The small velvet box where I kept my pendant from 1979, our first anniversary gift, was missing. The drawer beneath it sat slightly ajar, as if it had been closed too quickly. For a long moment, I just stood there, the silence so complete I could hear the slow beat of my own heart. That pendant wasn't gold or diamond. It was silver, engraved with our initials, T and G, barely visible from years of wear. It wasn't worth much to anyone else, but it was everything to me. And now it was gone. I opened every drawer, checked the jewelry box, even the small ceramic dish on the nightstand where I sometimes left my earrings. Nothing. Then I looked at the space again, the faint square of dust where the box had been. Graham had been in here. He must have come in after I went to bed, maybe while I slept. Downstairs, I heard the faint hum of the espresso machine. He was already awake. I steadied my breathing, forcing calm into my voice before stepping into the kitchen. "Morning," I said. He turned, smiling too quickly. "Morning? Coffee?" "Sure," I replied, watching his hands. He moved easily, too easily. "I was looking for my pendant. The silver one." He froze only for half a second before recovering. "The old one? Maybe you misplaced it." "I don't misplace things," I said gently. He chuckled, pretending lightness. "Maybe it fell behind the dresser. I'll check later." I already did. He turned away, pouring coffee, his back stiffening just slightly. "It'll turn up," he said. I didn't respond. Instead, I took the mug, thanked him, and walked into the living room. From the corner of my eye, I saw his reflection in the glass door, shoulders tense, jaw tight. For a man who thrived on control, even silence could unnerve him. Once he left for work, I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. I typed pawn shops near me and found 3 within 5 miles. On impulse, I called the first one. "Morning," a raspy voice answered. "Hi," I said. "Do you log jewelry by initials or serial number?" "We tag by description. You looking for something that's specific?" "Yes. A silver pendant, oval-shaped, engraved T and G on a thin chain." The man hesitated. "You a cop?" "No, just someone trying to recover something that shouldn't have been sold." He sighed. "Hang on." I heard him shuffle papers, then murmur something to another voice. After a moment, he came back. "Yeah, we had something like that come in last night. Sold by a guy, mid-60s, gray suit. Said his wife passed away." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed level. "Did he leave a ticket number?" "Sure. Then 89C. You want me to hold it?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." The pawn shop sat in a narrow alley behind the hardware store. Inside, the air smelled of dust and regret. The man behind the counter looked up as I entered. "You the lady for 1189C?" "I am." He reached under the counter, pulled out the velvet box, and opened it. The silver gleamed faintly under the fluorescent light. My initials, our initials, still there. My breath caught. "I'll buy it back," I said. He nodded. 100 even. I handed him the bills and took the box. Before leaving, I asked, "Did he give a name?" "Yeah," he said. "Langford. Said it was time to let go." I walked out into the sunlight, the pendant heavy in my palm. "Let go," I whispered, to myself. The phrase twisted in my chest. He hadn't just sold it. He'd discarded it. erased the symbol that once meant we belonged to the same ledger. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. I wrote, "He pawned 1979. Moral boundary crossed." Beneath it, I drew a small circle, the shape of the pendant, and underlined it once. Symbols matter. When people stop respecting them, the soul of their intentions becomes visible. That afternoon, Mabel knocked on the door. She carried a small basket of muffins and her usual calm. "Thought you might like these," she said. "You've been quieter lately." "Thank you," I said, gesturing for her to sit. She studied my face. "Something's wrong," she said softly. I hesitated, then opened the box and showed her the pendant. "He sold it." Her eyes widened. "Oh, Tess, I got it back." "That's not the point." "I know," I said. "But sometimes recovery is its own point." She nodded slowly, her hands folding over mine. "You know, silence doesn't mean blindness. Some of us see more than we say." "I've always liked that about you," I replied. After she left, I went upstairs and placed the pendant back in its box, this time inside the drawer of my own desk, not his. I locked it, then set the brass key beside it. The two pieces of metal looked like they belonged together, one representing what he tried to take, the other what I intended to uncover. That night, Graham came home humming. "You look better," he said. "I found something I thought I'd lost," I answered. He smiled, not knowing how true that was. As he poured his drink, I studied him one last time. The man who used to give meaning to that pendant, now a stranger rehearsing affection. I felt no anger, only a steady awareness, the kind that comes when the numbers start lining up perfectly. Before going to bed, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Integrity has a sound. It's the click of a lock reclaiming what's yours." Then I closed it and listened to the faint echo of that truth filling the house. The next morning, the air felt heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I woke before dawn and made tea, the kind I used to drink during audits that lasted all night. Black, strong, grounding. I sat by the window, watching the first light move across the garden, and realized I wasn't waiting for Graham anymore. I was waiting for Monica. Paula had sent me her contact information the night before, found through the Harbor Sky booking logs. I didn't tell her what I planned, only that it needed to happen in person. When I texted Monica, she agreed to meet, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of guilt. We met at a small cafe near the docks, the kind of place where nobody pays attention to quiet conversations. She arrived exactly on time, dressed neatly but not expensively, her expression guarded. Ruby trailed behind her, earbuds in, eyes tired. "Thank you for coming," I said. Monica hesitated before sitting. "I wasn't sure if I should," she said softly. "You should," I replied, "because I think you've been told only half the story." Ruby glanced at her mother. "I'll wait outside," she said, slipping out before either of us could answer. Monica's hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee. "I know who you are," she said. "He told me you were sick, that you didn't recognize people anymore." I felt a flicker of anger, but it passed quickly. "Do I look confused to you?" She shook her head, eyes lowering. "No." "Then you know he lied to you, just like he lied to me." Tears welled briefly in her eyes before she blinked them back. "He said it was just business, that the money was for a project, something about insurance restructuring." "It was," I said, "only the project was me." She looked away, her voice breaking. "I didn't know, I swear, I didn't know it went that far." I reached into my bag and placed the pendant on the table. The silver glinted softly between us. He sold this last night, said I was gone. Do you understand what that means? Monica stared at it, the realization landing slow and painful. He told me it was over between you two, she whispered. That you'd agreed to simplify things. He's simplifying everything, I said quietly. Even me. He's filed to take legal control of my life. Conservatorship. It's already in motion. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. Oh God. You have a daughter, I said. Think about what it would do to her if she saw you become part of something like this. If she learned that silence was survival. Monica's eyes filled again. He promised he'd pay off my debts. He said it would be clean, that no one would get hurt. Someone always gets hurt, I said. Usually the person who trusted too long. She looked at me then, fully, as if seeing me for the first time. You're not angry. I was, I said. Now I'm strategic. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the only sound the soft clatter of cups from behind the counter. I didn't want to believe he could do this, she said finally. But last week, he asked me to sign a document. Something about consent. He said it was for travel insurance. Do you still have it? She nodded slowly. At home. I need it, I said. If you give it to me, you'll be protected. The truth always protects the one who tells it first. She stared at her hands, then looked toward the window, where Ruby was sitting on a bench, drawing circles with her sneaker on the pavement. She's the only reason I'm still standing, Monica said. I wanted to give her stability, not shame. Then this is how you start, I said softly. Tell the truth. For her. Monica wiped her eyes. If I help, you, what happens to him? Whatever the law decides, I said. I don't need revenge. I need accuracy. She gave a small, trembling laugh. You talk like an accountant even now. It's how I survive, I said. Counting what matters. She nodded, exhaling as if releasing something that had weighed her down for too long. I'll get you the document tonight. Thank you. When she stood to leave, Ruby looked up from her bench. You okay, Mom? She asked. Monica managed a smile. I will be. As they walked away, I watched the two of them move through the sunlight. Mother and daughter, imperfect but intact. There was something sacred in that. Maybe healing starts there, in the moment a woman chooses to stop protecting a lie. Back at home, I placed the pendant back in its box and opened my notebook. I wrote, Monica agrees to cooperate. Ruby, a reason. Integrity spreading. Then, beneath it, I added one more line. Justice begins when someone else believes you. That evening, Graham called from the office. His voice sounded cheerful, practiced. Thinking about making dinner reservations tomorrow, he said. For where? I asked. Someplace by the harbor, he said. Feels right. I smiled to myself. It does, I said. Let's make it memorable. When the call ended, I stared at the brass key on the desk beside the notebook. Every detail was in place now. Evidence, witnesses, motive, and truth. I had been patient long enough. The harbor lights flickered through the window as dusk settled over the water. Somewhere, Monica was explaining things to Ruby, and in some quiet office, Graham was finalizing his plan. What he didn't know was that mine was already complete. I closed my notebook, my reflection faint in the glass. Calm, steady, wounded, ready. I spent the next morning setting things into motion. Every line, Every number, every witness had its place. I had lived most of my life believing that order brought peace, but now I understood it brings power. Quiet, lawful, undeniable power. Eddie called first. "I've compiled everything," he said. "Wire transfer, policy trail, IP match. I've even got timestamps lined up with his travel records. It's airtight." "Good," I said. "Send copies to Paula and Detective Pike." He hesitated. "You're looping in law enforcement?" "It's time," I said. "No more rehearsals." Detective Dana Pike arrived just before noon. She was in her 50s, composed, with sharp eyes that measured words as though they carried weight. She stood in my kitchen, scanning the folders I'd laid out on the table. "Everything cross-referenced?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Chronological, with supporting evidence." I marked the relevant attachments: insurance policy, conservatorship draft, wire transaction, and booking manifest. She raised an eyebrow. "You could have been one of us." "I was something like that once," I replied. She gave a small nod. "This is clean work, but we'll need physical proof of intent, something that ties his plan directly to harm." "I know," I said. "That's why I invited him to dinner." She looked up. "You what?" "I told him last night that we should celebrate our reconciliation. I'll invite him tonight. Same place, same table. But this time, it'll be documented." Dana studied me, then sighed. "You're calm for someone about to expose her husband." "I've been auditing him for weeks," I said. "Calm comes from knowing the numbers add up." "Do you have recording consent for the dinner?" "I will," I said. "The restaurant has cameras, and Miles Ortega will handle the rest." At the mention of his name, my phone buzzed. It was Miles, the security officer from Harbor Sky. "Mrs. Langford," he said when I answered. "Got what you asked for. CCTV footage from last week. Your husband handing an envelope to Ms. Voss near the dock. Timestamp matches the flight booking." "Can you deliver it today?" "Already on the way," he said. I looked at Dana. "That's your physical proof?" By late afternoon, everyone was in sync. Paula confirmed the dinner reservation under my name. Eddie emailed the final report. Monica texted me a photo of the consent form Graham had made her sign. "For insurance," he told her. The file name was Switch Her Meds PDF. When I opened it, my chest went cold. The document detailed a plan to adjust medication for cognitive stabilization. My medication, apparently. The signature line bore her name, forged under pretense. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It was intent. I forwarded it to Dana and deleted the message. Within minutes, she replied, "This is enough. We'll be there tonight. Quiet entry, no scene. You'll start dinner. We'll observe." Evening fell early, draping the house in amber light. I dressed carefully, a navy dress, the silver pendant around my neck. Polished but understated, the pendant had become more than jewelry now. It was a boundary, a reminder that I still existed in my own name. When Graham came home, he looked radiant, almost relieved. "You're beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. I smiled faintly. "It's been a long week. I wanted to end it well." He grinned. "Dinner's at 7, right?" "Yes," I said. "Harbor Grill, just like before." We drove in silence. He hummed to himself once, something tuneless, while I watched the sunset slip behind the marina. When we parked, he reached for my hand. "I'm glad we're doing this," he said. "So am I," I replied. Inside, the hostess led us to our usual table, the corner booth by the window. A candle flickered between us, light catching the rim of his glass. For a moment, it almost felt normal again. He ordered wine, charmed the waiter, laughed too easily. I nodded, smiled, mirrored his rhythm. I'd learned long ago that balance comes before correction. Halfway through the meal, he leaned back, relaxed. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he said. "Starting over." "It does," I said. "Fresh ledgers, clean pages." He chuckled. "You and your ledgers." "Old habits," I said softly. As he lifted his glass again, I noticed the faint outline of a small microphone clipped near the candle, a device Miles had discreetly placed earlier. I looked down at my napkin, hiding my steady breathing. "Tell me," I said, "do you ever think about what we've built?" He smiled. "Of course. We've done well." "Together?" I asked. He hesitated, then laughed. "Yes, together." The waiter approached with a small envelope. "Compliments of the house," he said, setting it beside Graham's plate. Graham frowned. "What's this?" I leaned forward. "Open it." He slid it open, pulling out a printout of the Harbor Sky manifest. 2 names, T. Langford and Guest. His smile faltered. "Where did you—" "Doesn't matter," I said. "You booked 2 seats. You, me, and an accident waiting to happen." He stared at me, the color draining from his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." I reached into my bag and placed the pendant on the table, its chain glinting in the candlelight. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." Outside, the reflection of flashing blue lights rippled faintly on the window. He didn't notice yet. I did. "You planned everything," I said quietly. "But you forgot one thing." "What's that?" he asked, voice cracking. "That I always double-check the math." I leaned back, the faintest smile touching my lips. The balance sheet was complete. Within minutes, Dana and Miles would enter the restaurant and the silence would end. But for now, I let it stretch, perfect and heavy, until even he could hear how loud the truth had become. The room seemed smaller that night, though it hadn't changed. Same table, same candlelight, same quiet murmur of strangers clinking glasses. Only this time, I didn't come to share a meal. I came to deliver a record. Graham leaned back in his chair, trying to find the charm that used to protect him. "Tess," he said softly, "whatever you think you've discovered, it's a misunderstanding. I was trying to protect us." "From what?" I asked, and "From collapse. From losing everything. You wouldn't understand." I cut him off, calm and measured. "Then help me understand. Let's review the details together." I reached into my bag and placed a small silver USB drive on the table. He stared at it as though it might explode. "What's that?" he asked. "Evidence," I said. "Play it." He hesitated. I leaned slightly forward, my voice still even. "You used to love transparency. Let's be transparent." Reluctantly, he connected the drive to his tablet. The screen lit up with the Harbor Sky logo. The first clip began, CCTV footage from the dock. He and Monica stood beside a seaplane, his hand pressing an envelope into hers. Her face was anxious. His was confident. He froze, whispering, "Where did you get this?" "I told you," I said. "I audit for a living." The next clip rolled. A bank transaction record. The $60,000 wire to MV Consulting. Then the screen displayed the insurance policy. $2.2 million. Beneficiary, Theresa Langford. His signature gleamed under the cursor, neat and deliberate. "I can explain," he said, his voice cracking. "You've always been the emotional one, Tess. I made a mistake." I spoke quietly. almost gently. You made several. The third file opened. The conservatorship petition. My name listed as protected party. His as proposed conservator. The camera caught his face as realization settled. He looked smaller under the restaurant lights, like a man watching his own mask disintegrate. I let the silence fill the space between us. Then, from the speaker, another sound began, a voice recording. His voice, the one from the memo 15 years ago. You have this way of noticing everything, it said. It keeps me honest. He froze, eyes wide. The echo of his younger sincerity hung in the air like a ghost. I found this last week, I said. I thought you'd want to hear what honesty used to sound like. He shook his head, whispering, Tess, please. I reached into my bag again and placed the pendant, 1979, on the table beside the glass. You sold this, I said, for cash, for convenience, for nothing. He didn't speak. His eyes dropped to the pendant, the symbol that had outlived affection. I never cared about the money, Graham, I said softly. I cared about the arithmetic of trust. You turned love into math, and now the numbers don't lie. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. You can't prove intent. You can't prove I meant. The final clip began. A still image of a document appeared on the screen, the one Monica had sent me. Title, Medication Adjustment Schedule. His email attached. Switch her meds, sooner than planned. He went pale. You don't understand, he whispered. It was just a precaution. It was a plan, I said. And it's over. He reached across the table suddenly, gripping my wrist. You can't ruin me, he hissed. You won't survive this. I met his eyes, unflinching. I already have. Before he could speak again, two figures appeared behind him, Detective Pike and Miles Ortega. They moved quietly, their presence almost polite. Mr. Langford, Dana said evenly. We need a word. He turned, startled, stammering something about a misunderstanding. Miles collected the tablet while Dana read him his rights in a voice stripped of drama. Other diners turned briefly, then back to their plates. The world never stops for private justice. I sat still, my hand resting near the pendant. As they led him out, he looked back once, disbelief clouding his face. You did this to me, he said. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. You did this to yourself. I just balanced the account. When the door closed behind them, I exhaled for the first time in hours. The waiter approached hesitantly. Would you like anything else, ma'am? I smiled faintly. Just the check. He nodded and stepped away. I looked at the empty chair across from me, the candle flickering in the draft. For years, that seat had been filled by a man I trusted. Now it was just air and shadow. Freedom sometimes looks like emptiness at first. When I left the restaurant, the night smelled of rain and salt. The harbor lights shimmered on the water, each reflection bending but never breaking. I walked slowly toward my car, the pendant cool in my palm. Across the street, Monica stood with Ruby. She didn't approach, but our eyes met for a moment. A silent acknowledgement. Two women who had chosen truth over fear. Ruby smiled, small but real. I nodded once, then turned away. In the car, I watched the lights flicker over the windshield and thought of the first drawer, the first envelope, the first doubt that had started it all. Justice doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives with documentation. It arrives with balance. I drove home in silence, the faint hum of the engine like the slow turning of a final page. By morning, The house felt lighter, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when everything broken has finally settled where it belongs. I sat in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, watching light move across the tiles. Outside, the world kept going. Birds, traffic, the usual rhythm of people who didn't know that justice had visited my dining table last night. At 9 sharp, Detective Pike called. Her tone was steady but gentler than before. "He's in custody," she said. "Preliminary interrogation confirms intent to defraud and probable cause for attempted insurance manipulation. We'll keep him overnight." "Thank you," I said quietly. "There's something else," she continued. "The woman, Monica Voss, came in early this morning. She turned over her phone. Text messages between them, one specifically instructing her to switch her meds when she doesn't notice. We've forwarded them to evidence. She'll likely qualify for partial immunity." I closed my eyes. "Good," I said. "She deserves that. She said you convinced her without threats, just truth." "I only asked her to see what she already knew," I replied. Dana paused, then added, "Your report, the way you laid it out, our team thought it looked more like a legal brief than a victim statement." "Old habits," I said softly. "Old habits saved you," she said, her voice almost warm. "You did. Everything right, Mrs. Langford? We'll keep you updated." After the call, I set the phone down and stared at the folder on the table. Evidence, neatly labeled, now part of a story that no longer needed my narration. I walked to the study, opened my drawer, and pulled out the leather ledger I'd once given to Evan when he started teaching. He'd returned it years later, saying it felt too heavy for him. "Like carrying your conscience," he joked. The cover was worn smooth, the pages faintly yellowed. I ran my fingers across the spine and thought of the years I'd spent recording everything but myself. Then I picked up a pen and began to write, slow and deliberate. Entry 1. Balance restored. I documented every step: the drawer, the policy, the flight manifest, the playback dinner. Each line a confession of fact, not feeling. I left emotion out because the numbers already told the story. The doorbell rang just after 10. When I opened it, Evan stood there, his face pale but composed. "I saw the news," he said. "They mentioned a financial advisor arrested near Harbor Grill. I knew." I stepped aside, letting him in. "Come in, sweetheart." He hesitated, then hugged me, tight, desperate, like a child who'd just realized the ground beneath him could move. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I needed to protect you from the details," I said. "They're heavier than they look." He stepped back, studying my face. "Is it true? All of it?" "Yes," I said simply. He looked down, tears forming but not falling. "I defended him, Mom. I told people he was honest. I believed him." "So did I said. "Belief isn't a flaw. It's just trust misapplied." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "What happens now?" "The law will handle him," I said. "We'll handle us." He glanced at the ledger on the table. "What's that?" "Our balance sheet," I said. "It's time you had it." I handed it to him. He hesitated before opening it, reading the first page where I'd written "balance restored." His fingers traced the words like they were fragile. "You're giving this to me?" "Yes. Every family needs a record of what truth costs." He swallowed hard. "What if I don't want to remember?" "You will," I said gently. "One day, you'll teach someone else the same thing." He nodded, silent tears finally breaking free. "I'm sorry, Mom." I placed my hand on his cheek. There's nothing to be sorry for. The sins of a father shouldn't rewrite the heart of a son. He exhaled shakily, clutching the ledger to his chest. You sound like Dad when he was good, he whispered. I smiled faintly. Maybe he learned some of that from me. We sat together for a long time, not talking, just breathing the same clean air that filled the room. Outside, the sound of waves reached faintly through the open window. It reminded me of that night at Harbor Sky, when the water shimmered beneath the lights, when I realized I could still start over. When Evan finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. What are you going to do now? I haven't decided, I said. But for the first time, I don't need to calculate my next move. He smiled through tears. You always said math was comfort. Not anymore, I said. Now it's clarity. After he left, I looked around the house. Quiet, familiar, cleansed. On the kitchen counter, the pendant glowed faintly in a shaft of light, its silver surface catching the morning sun. I picked it up and held it against my chest. For years, I'd thought justice meant retribution. Now I knew it meant accuracy, balance, truth written in ink that doesn't fade. I whispered to the empty room, account closed. Then I turned the page in the ledger and began a new line. Entry 2, begin again. Evening light slanted across the floorboards, soft and forgiving. The kind of light that makes everything, even old pain, look almost gentle. I had spent the entire day moving through the house slowly, as if reacquainting myself with a space I'd once rented but never truly owned. The silence no longer pressed against me. It simply existed, neutral and kind. When I reached the study, I paused at the door. The desk waited there, the same way it had the night this all began. Polished, patient, deceitful. The drawer was still closed, as if it had been holding its breath since that first moment I pulled it open. I sat down in his chair and let my hands rest on the wood. For a long time, I didn't move. Then, with a steady exhale, I opened the drawer. The same sound. The click, the glide, the whisper of air. Inside, it was almost empty now. The envelope labeled "For Her" was gone, taken into evidence weeks ago. The space it left behind was cleaner than before, almost too clean, as though absence itself had been polished into shape. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a blank envelope. On it, I wrote in slow, careful strokes, "For me." I placed it in the drawer, exactly where his had been. The pen felt heavier than it should have. For years, I'd written reports for other people, detailing other people's faults, their hidden transactions, their quiet deceptions. But this was the first audit I'd done on myself. I had loved a man who used numbers as armor and silence as currency, and I had survived him without becoming him. I sat there listening to the familiar noises of the house, the creak of old pipes, the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of gulls drifting inland. Each sound belonged to me now. They were proof of presence, not ghosts of loss. After a moment, I opened the small digital recorder, the same one that had held his old voice memo. I pressed play. His voice filled the room again, young and hopeful. "You keep me honest," it said. When it ended, I pressed record and spoke softly into the same machine. "You kept me sharp," I said, "but honesty was mine all along." I stopped the recording and set it beside the envelope, letting the two memories rest together, his promise and my closure. On the shelf above the desk sat the velvet box holding my pendant. I opened it, the silver glinting under the warm light. The engraving was nearly invisible now, the initials worn down to a whisper. I traced them gently with my thumb. T and G, I murmured. Time and grace. Then I closed the lid. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 6. I rose, walked through the hallway, and stopped at the mirror near the door. My reflection looked unfamiliar, not younger, not older, simply unburdened. There were no makeup touches, no pretense of composure, just a woman who had outlived deceit. I whispered to the reflection, I canceled dinner to survive. Today, I live to breathe. The air outside smelled faintly of sea and pine when I opened the window. Somewhere beyond the harbor, planes rose and fell over the water. I wondered if Graham could see the sky from wherever he was being held, if he thought of the seaplane he'd once meant to use for escape. It didn't matter. My life no longer orbited his gravity. I returned to the desk, folded the ledger open to a blank page, and wrote, Closure achieved. Healing in progress. Then I drew a small circle around the word healing, the same way I'd circled discrepancies in old reports. Only this time, the error was resolved. I locked the drawer gently, the key turning with a satisfying click. It sounded final, not bitter, like the punctuation mark at the end of a long confession. The light dimmed as clouds drifted past the window, leaving only a soft reflection of myself in the glass. For a moment, I imagined the woman I had been, the one who found an envelope labeled for her, who canceled dinner, who walked out into the night without a plan but with instinct. I wanted to thank her. She was the beginning of everything I understood now. When darkness finally filled the room, I didn't turn on the lamp. I let it settle around me instead, calm and familiar. In the quiet, I could still hear faint echoes of the recorder, the click, the breath, the words that started it all. I smiled, closing my eyes. The audit was complete. The morning of the flight arrived cool and blue, the kind of air that smells like salt and promise. Evan met me at the harbor, holding 2 coffees and the same quiet smile he used to wear as a boy when he wanted me to know everything would be fine. The wind lifted his hair, sunlight catching the edges of his jacket. For a second, I saw both versions of him, the child I once protected and the man now protecting me by simply showing up. The seaplane waited at the dock, gleaming silver beneath the morning light. I had booked the flight under my own name, this time without deception, without an asterisk beside my existence. The attendant helped us with the small bags, and when she asked for identification, I handed her my driver's license and smiled. It felt good to see my name printed there, unchallenged, uncontested, mine. As we walked toward the boarding ramp, Evan said softly, "You sure about this?" "Completely," I said. "It's not a getaway. It's a recalibration." He smiled. "You sound like you're writing one of your reports again." I laughed quietly. "Maybe I am. Just this time. The numbers are feelings." Inside the cabin, the seats were soft leather, the windows wide enough to catch the morning sun. As the engine started, I felt the faint vibration through the floor, like the pulse of something alive. I looked out toward the dock, at the very spot where Graham once stood beside Monica, plotting a different kind of flight. Today, that same place looked harmless, almost peaceful. Time has a way of cleaning the stage after the actors leave. As we began to taxi across the water, Evan reached over and squeezed my hand. "You never told me what you wrote in that last ledger entry," he said. "I wrote, 'Begin again.'" He nodded, watching the water ripple beneath us. "Seems about right." The plane lifted smoothly, the harbor shrinking below until the world looked small, balanced, and mercifully quiet. I leaned back, letting the hum of the engine blend with my thoughts. The clouds opened like folded paper, the coastline stretching out in curves of light and shadow. Evan pointed toward the window. "There's the marina," he said. "Looks different from up here." "Everything does when you rise above it," I said. For a while, neither of us spoke. I traced the outline of the pendant resting against my collarbone, the same one he had pawned and I had reclaimed. Its surface was warm from my skin, its weight familiar again, not as a reminder of love lost, but of integrity regained. I thought of Graham then, not with anger, not even with sorrow, but with a strange kind of clarity. There are people who build their lives like ledgers, always adjusting, always hiding imbalance under polished lines. And there are those who learn to let the numbers speak, no matter how painful the total. Evan broke the silence. "Do you think he'll change?" I looked out the window at the horizon, soft and endless. "I think everyone changes," I said. "Just not always in the direction they should." He nodded, thoughtful. "You still want me to visit him?" "Yes," I said. "Tears won't rebuild anything, but truth might. Tell him I'm fine. Tell him I forgave him, just not the math." He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "You never stop being an auditor, do you?" "It's the only way I know how to measure peace," I said. As the plane climbed higher, the world below blurred into patterns, fields, roads, rivers, lines converging into balance. I realized then that life, like any account, only makes sense when you step far enough back to see the whole page. When we leveled off, Evan leaned back and closed his eyes. I turned toward the window, watching the light shift across the water. For the first time in a long time, my mind was quiet. Somewhere below, near the community center by the pier, I noticed a small crowd gathered for a charity event. A banner fluttered in the wind, something about scholarships for single mothers. Among the people, I caught sight of two familiar figures, Monica and Ruby. They stood near the table, handing out flyers, faces calm, eyes steady. They didn't see me, of course, but I smiled anyway. Redemption doesn't always need witnesses. Sometimes it's enough to know someone else made it out too. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Smooth skies ahead, folks. We'll level out for the next half hour. Perfect day to fly." I rested my hand over the pendant and whispered to myself, "Perfect day to live." Evan turned toward me. "What did you say?" I smiled. "Nothing, just thinking out loud." He nodded, and we sat in easy silence as the seaplane cut through the light, each wave below scattering into silver shards. I opened my small notebook one last time and wrote a single line. I canceled dinner to survive. Today, I fly to live. The pen moved slowly, deliberately, the ink drying into permanence. I closed the cover, set it on my lap, and let the wind hum against the glass. Below us, the harbor curved into a circle of calm water, the same harbor where it had all begun. Balance restored. Justice quiet. Life, finally, my own.